lying in your beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
And welcome to Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.tv. Thank you for joining me this Wednesday evening. Got quite a bit of things to cover tonight. One thing we'll cover is a new form of ID that allows you to be a citizen of the world. We'll get into a little bit of that, and I definitely want to have open phones during that topic there. One out of libertyviral.com. Guess how old the founders were in 1776? Their ages will surprise you. Got quite a few out of benswan.com. One has to do with here locally, and it has to deal with Governor Mike Pence and a news site. We'll get into that. I'm going to start off with one from Ben Swan right now. And this is a exclusive interview Ben Swan got with one of the co-creators of Gray State. And he speaks about David Crowley's sudden death and Gray State going dark for now. So I just want to go ahead and dive into this since I did cover this last Friday. David Crowley, the creator of Gray State, his sudden death, him, his wife, and his daughter. And we'll just go ahead and dive into this.
Hey there guys, Ben Swan here, and welcome to this episode of Disrupt, brought to you by our sponsor at benswan.com, Infidel Body Armor. I want you to check these guys out. Some of the best body armor you're going to find anywhere. And by the way, we've been warning you about this, but already we have new members of Congress who are claiming that they want to see bills passed that would limit the amount of body armor that any citizen can own. I want you to check out Infidel Body Armor before that starts to happen. Look at their product. They have absolutely, bar none, the best body armor you'll find anywhere. And if you use the promo code LIBERTY, you get 10% off. Check these guys out. If you're in the market for it, you can't do better than Infidel Body Armor. Now let's get to this week's episode of Disrupt. Here. Well, guys, I'm glad you're with me for this week's episode, and I got to tell you, it is a very heavy one very sad story to be talking about here. David Crowley is a name that many people don't necessarily know. He certainly wasn't a household name, but he was an absolutely inspirational person in the liberty movement. David is the creator, the writer, the director, the force behind a movie project called Gray State.
Since last night's declaration of martial law, soldiers are moving in to secure key areas in all
In response to UN President's Minneapolis.
The Gray State Project. He is also a creative partner in the project and a friend of David Crowley. And Danny, I'm glad that you're here with us. I know it's been incredibly difficult for you and for the rest of the folks associated with this project in what has to be a time where this news has been truly devastating. Catch us up.
Yeah, I don't think devastation really kind of describes the feeling that we have of what kind of transpired with David and his family. When we got the news on Sunday afternoon, we almost, me and a group of friends, I got the phone call from one of my dear friends, Adam, and we were just in shock and disbelief about what actually transpired. It wasn't until probably yesterday when everything really kind of started sinking in about what's really happened, because at that time it turned into almost containing fires with how the media starts spinning David's image on the press on it as being kind of a gun enthusiast, right-wing fanatic, conspiracy theorist, a vet who had PTSD that flew off the handles and murdered his wife and his daughter and then took his own life on it. And from how the media was spinning it and how we know David personally, we knew that this situation, there's so many layers to it that it's going to take time to kind of unravel it. Because David was one of those very unique individuals that me and a lot of friends had the fortune of being able to be a part of his life. He was a private guy, but he was also very open. He was one of those incredibly smart individuals that when he would process or have these ideas that they would be coming through him almost like 1,000 miles an hour, and you would have to keep up. But he would get really frustrated because he would have to end up like dumbing himself down to really explain what he's trying to get across on it. And I say that in the context because a lot of people like that are insanely self-motivated, and especially artistically, and it's a really kind of hard level to balance when you're dealing with a regular society in general, and especially in the magnitude that with the success of just a simple concept trailer of Gray State and the topics, because they're such intense debated topics that a lot of people from activists to conspiracy theorists kind of latch onto, and they use it very much of a visual form for a spearhead for their ideology with it. So with that being said, with David around his family, he was such a softie, and when I say that, I mean when he was around his family, he was so loving, and he was so caring, and he was so in love with his wife, and he loved his kid, and being a part of that. And whenever I would be over there, me and my other friends, Adam and Mason and Sean, we knew that we were fortunate enough to actually see that. So
now, Danny, let me ask this, because I know that David obviously served in Iraq. He was an Iraq War veteran. Immediately, of course, media turns to the idea that this is an episode of PTSD, and that becomes kind of the blame for all of this. To the best of your knowledge, and I know it's difficult to speculate on this, but to the best of your knowledge, had David exhibited any symptoms or signs of PTSD in the years that you've known him?
Nothing that would, I guess, constructively fit the bill for a diagnosis of PTSD. Not in the form of David. And that could have been masked with his creativity on it. Hindsight's always 20/20, and especially in a moment like this. And I think to label that right away that this was the sole cause of it, I don't personally. I know that he mentioned that he did suffer from some forms of PTSD, and I think that all of us in some shape or form could actually, I guess in some form diagnosis have that, obviously more extent than others, but nothing to the extent that immediately, this is, it's black and white. He flipped out and kind of lost his mind. It's just that diagnosis to explain the tragic events just doesn't fit with it. There's much more stuff that I guess we can only assume leading up to it, to the tragic event. And like I said, that's going to take time because we're getting little bits here, little bits there from other people that he communicated with. That's beginning to kind of allow us to get the bigger picture of what actually transpired.
When you say little bits, are you able to tell me what some of those little bits are?
Yeah, little bits are kind of more communication with David's family on it, and how he was communicating with his family on it, with things going on to it. Because David, when he would go into a very creative mode, he would kind of, I guess, go off the radar for a couple of weeks, and this is very kind of normal for him. And then he would just reemerge with these ideas, this new plan, new direction where you want to take things, or he might even have a completely different idea for a project. He just needed to get out of his head. And so for him to do that, his family was used to that. And me as being a creative partner with him and also a friend and a business associate, that was, familiar with it. It wasn't anything, there wasn't really any kind of red flags that kind of went off that we should be really concerned about. It was just the more lapse of time that was going by when we weren't hearing from him. That's when me as a collective friend started getting a little bit more concerned. Something wasn't feeling right with us. And we started reaching out to each other, and it was at a point where we were going to go over to his place kind of unannounced just to check in on him and whatnot. But like I said, hindsight, you can't really predict this sort of thing would have transpired like it did.
Yeah. So, Danny, you'll have to forgive my ignorance on this. My understanding, and I could be a little bit off here, but my understanding is that when people suffer from PTSD, especially veterans when they come back, typically when symptoms of PTSD come up, they seem to cycle somewhat, and there are typically triggers associated with that. Just wondering if anyone had noticed anything that would indicate there was a PTSD trigger that was going off. I know that David was in a pretty exciting place in terms of the Gray State Project. And I don't know how much you can speak to that. I know we're being sensitive to that. But what can you say about that, where he was in this place and where the project was?
I'm only going to be able to comment a little bit on things we're getting really excited for him for the amount of, because I guess he's taken the burden as being such a creative guy. He's also I don't want to say controlling, but his vision is so cut that he likes to have his hands in everything just to make sure he gets it done. So it's his structure is very militant on it. And this could have possibly been years of building up on it. I know one of the biggest things that he had to grapple with, and we discussed many of times kind of when we were creating the universe of Gray State, and like the major themes that we were playing with, was that we had a huge responsibility to present it in a manner that it wouldn't become a tool for some radical person to use it for justification on a tragedy or some point of violence with it. And that weighed heavy on his conscience. I know that. And it does with mine still to this day, and it will continue what will transpire with Gray State. And I know he dabbled with that, and he always never felt comfortable or felt good about the formation of the story that he was trying to tell. It was never good enough. There's always a lot of holes with it. but I know that he felt like he needed to carry the world and that burden on his shoulders because people, when we started going, when he went to like a Bilderberg rally and also the RNC, he became a symbol for hope and inspiration for a lot of people, and that could weigh a lot of pressure on an individual who's not used to being thrust into a public eye right away or into that kind of statute. So I know that was a lot of things going through his head, and he would wrestle with those themes a lot. But I know he had the ability to channel that fear and that and those insecurities into his characters of Gray State with the direction of the script that he felt the most comfortable with on that. And I support him with it because the characters that we came up with are a lot of the original ones, but he was going more daring with the subtext and the themes with it, which I supported. I thought it was great. That's why I was so passionate working with him, because he just did not want to make
just another film.
Yeah, just another film, but also like the themes in general, that kind of what we're dealing with. There's not a lot of filmmakers at that time. I mean, when we were coming up with the concept, and you have to understand, this was years before Occupy, or even a year before Occupy Wall Street. This was years even before Ferguson situation and what's going on with that whole entire thing, and just where the state of the country's at right now. And that's why people looked at David as the kind of like almost prophet figure on that point. And that's a lot of
that he had foresight into a lot of this.
Yeah, I mean, we would sit, and what the thing that forged our friendship and our bond was that I'm a lover of history and ancient history and also American history. And I told him, and him being a combat vet, and I'm not a combat vet, we would have discussions about what would actually take place if there would be a second Civil War, a second American Revolution. What would it take place with advances of technology, and also, but on the higher powers, the controlling factors with that, and how would that take place on, with that direction? And that really forged in the beginning process of what the Gray State is. And even then, back then, this is like 4 or 5 years ago, we knew we were playing with something we fully didn't understand. We fully didn't understand when we were shooting it. We fully didn't understand even like a year or two after the release of the trailer. We kind of really got a big glimpse when we went to Boston after it was 3 days after the Boston bombing. We were working with Oath Keepers and shooting some footage for the Gray State, The Rise documentary, where it really hit home what we were actually playing with and how much people invested and looked for it as a representation of their belief system on, like I said, in a medium form. And that's a lot of weight. And then you compound that stress of what David was trying to spearhead, taking this idea that's never been done and presenting it in a Hollywood fashion on top of that, and dealing with a lot of people who would, like to get their hands on it and influence it and also take it somewhere. Or David's worst fear was just going to that process, maybe potentially shooting the film, and then it just being in a nice little package sitting on a shelf, and that's it. And then he would let down, the hordes of fans that put us in the position that where David's at. And I've been lucky and fortunate enough to be a part of that.
I mean, let me ask you about the investigation here. And again, I don't know how much you can say about it. We mentioned before that the initial reports here was that it was a murder-suicide. I have reports that some investigators may be calling this suspicious at this point. That may just be, people hoping that it's suspicious. But I'm hearing that it may be suspicious. And I also have heard that there is reports of a sliding door that was left unlocked. I don't know how much you can say about the investigation. I know you're following it closely. What can you tell us about that?
The only thing I can confirm on right now is obviously the investigation's ongoing. I haven't seen the reports about it being suspicious on it. Until we get the full amounts, the full actual report from the police and what they've come to it, I haven't really, and from what we're getting from, like I said, from communication with the family and from some other individuals I'm not going to name, who are kind of coming forth with their own story, I'm just going to probably just stick to it as what the examiner said, as it being a
murder-suicide
at this point right now.
Danny, let me ask you about this, because there is a report that's out now from, I believe it's Canada Free Press. And an interviewer who had Danny on a show says that, and this was back in 2012, so it was a little while ago, but says he had Danny on the show and he was talking to him pre-interview. And in that pre-interview conversation, he jokingly said something about, Danny, I hope you don't have any thoughts of suicide. And he was joking about it in reference to Andrew Breitbart dying and Michael Hastings dying, and just saying off the cuff, I hope you're not killed over this project. And he says that David had responded to him and said that no, he had no feelings of suicide and he had no suicidal thoughts. And so they had talked about this prior to the interview. I'm just wondering if you've seen that report and if you can comment on that at all.
That I can't comment because I don't know, and I don't totally. I'm not familiar with the interview on it, so I won't be able to comment on.
That would be news to you. You weren't familiar with that conversation prior to.
I'm not. No. I would. If the only part of that conversation I would have been familiar with would have been on what would have taken place during the part of the interview. I know that knowing David, any point, of a suicide and the extreme of the tragedy doesn't, like I said, it doesn't, for us, it still doesn't make sense.
Danny, I just want to ask you this. Did you guys ever have this conversation? And the reason I ask that is because, look, I've been asked this question many times before. A lot of people have asked me dozens and dozens of times, do you feel safe? Do you worry about being killed for what you're doing? They jokingly say, are you suicidal? And they don't say it making a joke out of suicide. They say it, in reference to Andrew Breitbart. They say it in reference to Michael Hastings. And they say, look, I hope that you are safe in what you're doing. And so they ask the question, you're not feeling suicidal, are you? I'm just wondering, did you guys ever have this conversation about him fearing for his life, feeling threatened? Is that a conversation about death that you guys ever had?
We've had that conversation early on it, and this is when, but then there was a period when David started putting distance between his friends and his family on it, and that I know that he was going through a personal transition, and I don't know if he was battling a lot of the bigger pictures, questions on spiritualism and his placement within society and also as a filmmaker. So I don't know if that part, but the discussions that we had before, I know that he wouldn't be suicidal because David was one of the strongest guys I've ever met before in my life, not only intellectually, but just physically all around. When you think of alpha males, he was like to the T of that. So that's why, and like I said, for me to say that it was a suicide and dual murder, it's hard enough to actually have those words come out of my mouth. Do I truly believe that? I'm going to look at the reports. I'm very analytical. I know David, but at the same time, I got to look at the bigger picture and all the facts and from the information that's coming in and what David was doing and kind of where he was emotionally at that time. Some of it is up to speculation because the contact with him became less and less in the course of a couple months ago, and that just wasn't me. It was his family and his friends on the same time. So
he was to some extent withdrawing.
Yeah, well, he was withdrawing, but again,
but that wasn't unusual.
No, it wasn't unusual because I want to reinstate that he was coming up with a couple of new directions for what he wanted to proceed with Gray State. And when he gets in that mode, I just let him get in that mode. And I've been with him in that part of that mode when he gets kind of into the creative state. And it's one of those things you got to let him be, let him process, let him get in all the things down that he wants to show you. So he's able to actually explain it to you fully without you asking questions. And then him becoming frustrated on it because, like I said, his mind works like 1,000 miles an hour and everything. So, and also with that, it's just that with the news and everything, and I can see how getting that news out and people relating that I'm not suicidal, and with a lot of people who are within the world of conspiracy and saying that he was, outed by the government. I don't think he actually was outed by the government on this because of, like I said, the relationship and you being an outsider and us being close family. But I know that we're working thoroughly on investigating it, and we know that we have a long road ahead of us, and it's going to take a lot for us to fully digest the actual claim of a murder-suicide at that point. So yeah, until I get all the facts in, and I know that his family feels the same way, and I know, his close friends feel the same way. Like everybody else, it still doesn't sit right because we don't want to believe it in it, and but we just don't want people to do anything stupid on it and use it for a justification for some other tragedy.
Danny, as we wrap up here, and I thank you so much for your time and for this conversation today, there are a lot of fans of Gray State, of the project, certainly of David and what he was doing, fans of yours, people who have stood with you all and supported this project for a long time. And I know the question is going to be raised, and so I would be remiss if I did not ask you, where does the project stand? What can you speak to as far as that goes? What do people need to know about where it goes from here? Because this project obviously bigger than just you or even just David. It is a project and a labor for a lot of folks. Just wondering what you can tell us as far as the future of Gray State.
For all the fans who've been supporting us, we couldn't have done it without the help with you guys. I know that we're going to be, and this is going to be also the representatives of Gray State. For our own personal dealing with the matter and coping and making sure we're at a good spot, we're going to go black for a while until we can fully understand where the direction is going to be. Because a lot of the vision behind Gray State was David, and we don't know how to, until the extent we can get the full idea where David wanted to go with it. I want to get to that point and then make sure we can stick and make the purest, best vision that David wanted for it. Because that's what David deserves, 100%. I mean, there shouldn't be any kind of sidestepping that at all. I think there will be something that will come from this. I don't know what it will be right now, but I know that we won't stop at it. I know that it will take the Gray State will take a new shape and form, but we won't compromise. I know that because I won't in general, because I feel like I'll be compromising a good friend and a visionary, and that's what David was. And I know that there's been a lot of pour out and people wanting to help, and if they want to help, what they can do is that Dan Crawley, David's brother, we've been meeting with him a lot just in this time of need, and we set up a GoFundMe campaign for Comel, David's wife, for Rainey, because Comel's mother is currently on her deathbed, and she's dying from cancer, and they don't have any life insurance, and they're in Waco, Texas, and their bills are over somewhere of $5 million right now. And we know that we probably won't hit that mark with what we have, but to make something good come from this, we would like people, if they can, and I think you should have the link with you, Ben, and if you could put it up there on your site, that'd be great. Whatever they can do to kind of funnel that and just keep the Crawleys in their thoughts, the Comel's family in their thoughts too, and just know that it could be a little while, but it's not going to stop us in our tracks right now. We just have to take some time so we can grieve and just take care of ourselves first, because if we don't, then what we try to come out with the idea with Gray State and the vision that David had will not even come close to it. And the last thing I want to do, and everybody else associated with part of the team, we do not want to let the fans down and not get what we wanted to out originally if David was around.
Yeah, and Danny, again, I want to thank you for your time so much, Danny Mason. And by the way, folks, I want to just second what he said there. There are a lot of people frustrated right now. There are a lot of people who are feeling a variety of emotions, from sadness to anger to frustration to disbelief. If you're one of those people and you're watching this and you're wondering, how can I channel energy right now? Don't do something stupid. One of the things you can do in channeling that energy is to support the family of this man who is really struggling right now. We'll put the GoFundMe here in the link on YouTube and also at benswan.com. So if you're watching in either location, absolutely a way that you can help and that you can find a way to be useful in this time, a very difficult time. Danny, thank you so much for your time, and thank you guys for watching. We'll see you again soon.
Okay. That was Danny August Mason, co-creator of Gray State. It's definitely been a heavy thing that the Liberty movement's had to take on. many of us have been following the progress of Gray State and have witnessed the creative genius of David Crowley, and our hearts go out to his family and his friends. And when the team over at Gray State's ready to move forward, I'll try to get him on, and hopefully David's vision will be brought to light. Okay, going to move on here. Just give me a quick second. Okay, one thing I talk about on this broadcast quite a bit, our youth. And I continually try to tell people, and a lot of times it's hard to get people to even accept it, that we baby children, we go, oh, let the kid be a kid, but we're letting the kids be a kid until they're, young adults, and they don't, gaining the maturity, that's a step that you have to continually take. You can't just go, well, we're not going to, have a maturity. We'll let them be a kid for now. Well, it's always nice to let kids be kids, but there's a level of maturity that needs to come along with that too. And I always point to, look at the past and look at a lot of the successful people in history. And I'm talking about the ones that were successful, and they were free thinkers, they were creative, they had a genius to them. They were young. These people were hitting success levels at such a younger age than what we see a lot of the youth anymore. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have the creative geniuses out there, but a lot of time they are private school, homeschooled, not a crap load come out of our public schools, that's for sure. And I've seen this article here from Liberty Viral. Guess how old the founders were in 1776? Their ages will surprise you. Says here, do you ever worry that you're getting old and maybe that you haven't accomplished anything of value in your life yet or found your true purpose? Then reading this list is only going to make you even more depressed. The founding fathers of the United States who fought King George III of England for the freedom are legendary in American history, but how old were these men in the year that the Declaration of Independence was written? Their ages at that critical point in history might surprise you. The first one here, Marquis de Lafayette was 18. Lafayette, a French military officer whose contributions to the American Revolution were pivotal in helping to beat back the British, was 18 years old in 1776. Number 2, James Monroe. James Monroe, who went on to become the 5th president of the United States, but who was an anti-federalist and opposed the Constitution, was 18 in 1776. He helped secure the Louisiana Purchase as a diplomat to France. Number 3, Aaron Burr, 20. Aaron Burr, the Vice President of the United States and the man who killed Alexander Hamilton in a duel, was 20 in 1776. Number 4, Alexander Hamilton, 21. Alexander Hamilton, founder of the Federalist Party and the first Treasury Secretary, was 21 at the signing of the Declaration of Independence in 1776. Number 5, James Madison, 25. James Madison, the father of the Constitution and author of the Bill of Rights, was 25 in 1776. Number 6 was Thomas Jefferson. He was 33 when he drafted the Declaration. John Adams was 40. John Adams was the second president of the United States. He was 40 in 1776, an old man compared to the rest of the founders in 1776. Number 8, George Washington, 44. George Washington, first president of the United States, was 44 in 1776. Number 9, Samuel Adams. Samuel Adams was ancient in 1776. He was 53 at the time of the signing. Number 10, Benjamin Franklin. The oldest participant in the revolution was Benjamin Franklin, who was 70 years old on July 4th, 1776. So, even though there were some old ones, there were a lot of pivotal characters that were very young. And I don't want anybody to feel down or like you haven't succeeded. What I'm saying is we are more than what we've become. We have a lot greater potential, and we have to start throwing the chains and the bonds off of us. That way we can succeed on our own merits and let us benefit from the fruits of our labor instead of robbing us of our fruits of our labor. And that's something that is definitely being hampered by our system today. Okay. Now, one thing I talk about quite a bit is our monetary policy, our banking system, the Federal Reserve, and how it robs us. But this is also worldwide. The World Bank, the IMF, all the central banks in a lot of the European countries, Canada, we're basically being robbed. And we get robbed at gunpoint. Your voluntary tax basically comes with threat of force if you don't pay it. Canada is not immune to the same thing. We Are Change recently interviewed former Canadian Minister of Defense and talked about banker takeover of Canada. And this is Paul Heller. So here we go.
Change.org, and I'm joined by the one and only Paul Hellyer, former Minister of Defense from Canada, a great statesman, someone that I admired for quite a bit. And I have to say, one thing Paul was telling me about recently, just when we were eating lunch before, he was telling me about how he was growing up in the Depression and how the whole financial system in Canada was taken over by banksters. So, Paul, can you tell us about some of your experiences growing up in Canada? You're 91 years old. You lived through a lot. You saw a lot. Can you tell us what are some of the most important things people should know about the history of the banking system in Canada?
Sure, I'd be delighted to. It's sort of the passion of my life. My late wife would have called it obsession. But I grew up during the Depression, as you stated, and saw poverty at its rawest form, people coming by looking for food. We lived in a farm, and people would come by and walk in, and mother would give them something to eat to keep them going. And So this really burned a place in my mind, which was still there. You know, I still just can't get it out of my mind. And so after I went to school for a while in California, and then a couple of years in the armed forces, and went to university. I studied economics, and I asked my professors if recessions and depressions were necessary, and they couldn't give me an honest answer. And that was the reason that I went into politics in the first place, because I had come to the conclusion in university that they were not necessary, that they were just part of the system. And you can ask the first 20 economists you see, and 19 of them at least will say, well, it's a cyclical system, and that's the way it works, and you should try and beat the cycles if you can anticipate them. So I saw from the Depression on through until now a complete, well, more than one cycle of experiments in monetary policy. And I know what will work and what won't work. And in 1938, which was before the war, of course, there were no jobs in Canada. And then along came the war, and all of a sudden, people were either in the armed forces or working in industry, building munitions, building factories, doing all of these things. And then we brought unemployment down from a very high figure to a historical low of 1%. Never been achieved since, and frankly, I wouldn't want to bring it down that low now because it would be inflationary, but if we could get half of what we have now, that would be a really good thing, which we can do. And so you might say, well, where did the government, because it had no money, get the money to pay the people in the armed forces and to pay for the munitions and to build the factories? And the answer is the Bank of Canada, which was a publicly owned bank owned by the people of Canada, printed it, printed. And the way the system worked was that the government would give the Bank of Canada a piece of paper, which we call a bond, and the Bank of Canada would run the printing presses, give the government the cash, deposit it to their accounts in the banks, and the government spent it to pay those of us who were in the armed forces and to buy the munitions and buy our equipment and all that sort of thing. And then Canada, for the size of our country, put on an amazing show during World War II and played a very significant part. At one point, I think we had the third or fourth largest navy in the world, and we're just a tiny country as far as the population is concerned. So we really did our share and more. And we had the Commonwealth Air Training Plan there. We had pilots from Australia, New Zealand, and England, and we had some from Norway as well. So we were in there and did our share. And so after the war, we had this same system. I didn't explain that what happened, the government would pay the interest on the bonds to the Bank of Canada, and then they would give the interest back to the government as dividends because we owned the bank, and they paid dividends, and all they deducted was the cost of administration, carrying things from one side of the street to the other. So this system worked perfectly, and after the war, we kept it on and used it for the post-war infrastructure, the St. Lawrence Seaway, a fantastic project, and the Trans-Canada Highway, first time ever that we had a ribbon of asphalt to run from one side of the country to the other, and then the big new airport terminals, and even more important, I think, as the foundation of our Social Security system, which was considered one of the best in the world. And so everything was really moving along very nicely until 1974. 1974 was a year of big change in the world, and it's never been the same since. So our governor of the bank, unilaterally, and without even discussing it with the Prime Minister or Parliament, changed the system, and instead of working for the citizens, the shareholders, and providing us with cheap money, zero-cost money, which we'd had, quite a lot of for so many years. They started taking their orders from the Bank for International Settlements in Zurich, Switzerland, which is really the apex of what my latest book I call the money mafia. It is really sort of the nerve center for the handful of people who really run the banking system, and they, along with others, run the world, but they're the top of the heap. And so then the central banks in the United States and Canada brought on two terrible recessions. Paul Volcker was trying out a new system. He bought into monetarism, which was the brainchild of Chicago School. Name doesn't come to mind.
That's fine.
Anyway, well, I should know it because I've taken it in vain so often. Anyway, he in effect decided that the bank should be deregulated, unregulated. And so we had this terrible recession because Volcker was a disciple, and he put interest rates in the United States up to 18%. In Canada, they went to 22%. And then that brought on the terrible recession. Millions of people lost their jobs, their houses, their businesses, and governments went into deficit, had to borrow in the market. And so instead of getting zero-cost money, we had to start paying 22% for it to pay the interest on the money that we borrowed as a result of the deficit. And they brought on another recession a decade later, 1991, and gave it to us again, just as we were beginning to recover a little bit. And so the cost of this to the ordinary people is astronomical. And Ellen Brown, who is one of the best people in the United States on money, she's written a book called The Web of Debt, which everybody should read the first 100 pages of if they're interested in this subject. She said that it had cost us more than $1 trillion. And shame on me, I didn't believe her. But as a privy councillor, former cabinet minister, I have access to the parliamentary press, parliamentary library research system, and they did the mathematics for me and came back and said, yes, from 1974-75 fiscal year to 2010-11, $1 billion. And in the United States, a comparable thing would be multiplying by about 13. So it's about the size of your total federal debt. And this was all as a result of, in effect, turning the money system completely. It had been largely run by the money mafia for a long time, but here it was completely turned over to them.
To private hands, to private banksters. And can you describe how the Banks of International Settlements is involved in all of this?
Well, the Bank for International Settlements, which actually was close to the Nazi Party during the 30s and then played both ends against the middle during the war, is where settlements between countries' currencies happen. And it's just sort of a exchange for one currency for another. But it has tremendous power. And more lately, under the Group of 20 after it was set up, they allowed the Bank for International Settlements to set the international rules which govern the system. And so let me talk about that now, because they have set the leverage, which I describe in the book. If I could go back to, say, the time when the Bank of England was incorporated, which is a little over 300 years ago, King William of Orange was fighting a war against the French and ran out of money and needed something to replenish his arms and build up his navy and so on. So had no credit. So somebody suggested, how about a bank? So he got some very rich bankers to put up £1,200,000 in gold and silver, and that was the capital of the Bank of England. And they lent it all to the king at 8%, which is a pretty high interest rate for a government guaranteed loan. And then the king said, now you may print, print, £1,200,000 and lend it to your rich friends at a high interest rate. So in effect, they were allowed to lend the same money to the king and to the friends and collect interest from both. So you get two batches of interest on one batch of capital. Well, over the years, that ratio, as we call it, or leverage is the sort of the official word that they use, has increased from 2 to 1, which it was then, 2 times interest, to a much higher figure. First of all, in the early years of the 20th century in the United States, your federally incorporated banks had to have 25% gold reserve, which meant they were able to lend their money 4 times. In Canada, when I was young, we had to have a cash reserve of 8%. And that means that the banks were able to lend the same money 12.5 times. After Friedman was the name I was looking for. After Friedmanism or monetarism or whatever you want to call it came into effect, and the rules changed, the banks were allowed to lend 20 times. So they could lend the same money 20 times. Now this is where I got the inspiration for the money mafia. We're having an investigation in our city of Montreal in Canada about the alleged rip-off of the mafia, and the Sicilian mafia have allegedly been taking 2.5% off the top of all the contracts in that big city for a long time. The banks take 95% off the top, which is the reason I call it the money mafia. And what it means is they can invest $5 million in what I call blood, sweat, and tears money. And then they can create credit to lend $20 million to other people and charge them high interest rates on it. And that's just virtual money. It's not real money. But the people that they lend it to have to pay back $20 million in blood, sweat, and tears money, plus interest. Yep. So you look at it from the standpoint of a student, for example, that needs to borrow $50,000 to finish their schooling, and the bank, bless them, and I use that in sort of a backhanded way, will often, if it's guaranteed especially, lend them up to $50,000 to finish their studies. But the bank only has to have $2,500 in blood, sweat, and tears money. When the student graduates, they have to pay back $50,000 in blood, sweat, and tears money. I mean, work at it for years to pay it off, plus interest. And that's the reason the system is really rotten to the core, and it's been that way for a long time.
Can you name some of the names or institutions or banks that were a part of this takeover in 1974?
In 1974, it was just, we transferred really responsibility for policy to the Bank for International Settlement. And this was, I think, generally adopted by pretty well most of the central banks of the world at that time. And it's still that way. Yeah. And quibbling about it in Congress, whether they should tighten, have the same rules or not, and so on. But the banks so far have outsmarted the politicians by using them to do their bidding, and it's got to change the system. Let me state bluntly, there will be no peace on earth and justice until the whole system is revised. And so in my book, The Money Mafia, A World in Crisis, I say that governments have got to start creating some of the money, like we did in Canada from 1939 to 1974. That is the solution. Not exactly the same system. I've put a better one in just a better mechanic, a way of doing it. But that they've got to get into the business of creating debt-free money that they can spend into circulation and not have to pay back with interest. Then they can balance budgets at the federal level, state level, municipal level. They can give people, the working people, a better deal on taxes. They can do a lot of things, including going the opposite way to what's been going on for the last 20 years, of the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer, by paying the working people more without having to raise the taxes of the rich people who are very averse to taxes. And they can do a lot of things. And if they instituted this system, which I'm recommending, 34% of all new money should be created by the government itself, and they introduced that system over 7 years, they would be able to reduce the federal debt, if they want, by something like 30 or 35%. So you could knock maybe $5 trillion off the federal debt in the U.S., or you could spend a trillion or so for helping some of the poor countries of the world that have been ripped off by the present system.
So just to clarify, you're calling for a system just like JFK or Abraham Lincoln implemented, where the government printed their own money, like Lincoln printed the greenbacks. Is that something that you're calling for as a solution to the Ponzi scheme that is the banking system today?
I'm not recommending 100% government-created money because I don't trust politicians to that extent, for one thing, having served with them for so long. And it would cause too much disruption in the system because the system has been established for so long. And pension funds and so on have a lot of government bonds. And what you're really talking about, if you did that, would be to pay them all off over a period of time.
Okay, I'm going to stop it right there. It goes on quite a bit longer. But I wanted to play it because this is a parallel to what's happened here in America and what's happened around the world with the central banking system. And then, it gets even larger when you start getting into the IMF and all that and the World Bank. And it's a complete control. And now, he talks about, I give this, idea for a better system. Do you really think the politicians that keep selling out are going to have a change of heart? How much have we been trying to get an audit the Fed bill passed, and they just won't let it pass? If you're not doing anything wrong, then what's the big deal? It's because you are probably more than likely doing something wrong. And, it'd be one thing if you're just a private bank. It's another thing when you're a private bank with the control over country's money supply. And you are what helps justify armed people threatening to come to your door if you don't pay taxes. You contribute, you're not the sole reason government is, but we know how the whole system plays out. It's one of those things that you read the Creature from Jekyll Island, really start researching a lot of that when it comes to our economy, our monetary policy. And then, it's easier to see the bubbles when they're created. You can go back before the housing bubble popped and watch speeches from Ron Paul about the housing bubble. He predicted it. He was warning people, hey, this is going to happen. And a lot of people didn't take him serious. And I took him serious. I didn't expect he was so right on how quick it was going to happen. Even I was kind of naive to how quick it would actually happen. No longer am I naive. When I see bubbles being created, I prepare. And, that's part of, survival. You have to be prepared for it. Talking about preparedness, I urge people to go check out the UCY store. Go to ucy.tv, click the UCY store tab, and it takes you to the UCY Amazon store that UCY has partnered with. And UCY has put together a collection of prepping gear, whether it comes to just prepping, camping, or even radiation supplies. Go to ucy.tv, hit that UCY store tab, check out that, and you get the same low prices that you get from Amazon if you were to go directly to them. But by purchasing through that link, you help support UCY and the network here. That gives a platform for me and the other hosts here to be able to speak truth and free your mind. At least try to attempt to help free everybody's mind. And, we're not always going to agree on everything, but I still think that humanity exists and that if we all prepare and we can come together on things that we agree on and just respect each other's right to live free without harming others, I think society could be a better place without having to even take government down or anything like that. There's no need for it. Society needs to change. When society changes, then we can make government null and void. A unneeded evil. It's one of those things that, you'll get these radicals out there that, we should grab our guns and go nuts. No, absolutely not. Last thing we need is bloodshed. I'm a very anti-war type person. And I come from, family that's been in the military. My grandfather, who I'm close with, he was in World War II. And, it goes back to my sixth great grandfather that was in the Revolutionary War. So it's one of those things that I understand when there is a need to defend yourself or defend humanity. When it comes to World War I or II, we weren't, our mainland wasn't being attacked. But if we didn't help out the rest of the world, we were next. It was something that was self-evident to most people. It's one of those things that I think with the expansion of the knowledge and people like me on the radio and people like you, I always urge more people to, find some type of social media or any type of media to spread the message of freedom and liberty and truth. And I think through that we can make the world a better place. But I think it's really up to us as individuals to take these steps. We can't wait on some artificial collective to come together and do it. That happens after the individuals have taken the step to do it. Another thing that I do definitely when I see these economic bubbles being created is I buy gold and silver. My choice for gold and silver and other metals is Amagi Metals, and I partnered with them. And if you go to antityrannynews.com/metal, you can purchase silver, gold, even base metals at a really great price. And you'll be getting the same great price, and they got some deals going on right now. And when you do go through that link, you help support this show and antityrannynews.com, which, tell you what, it's been a roller coaster trying to get everything done. I recently have started doing basically a mini episode. I want to end up doing 5 of these to start off with. And things like this take money even more than I realized. It's like every time I put out $1, I need to put out 2 more. But when you shop through, either the UCY store or, buy your metals through antityrannynews.com/metal, you're helping support alternative media. You're helping support these projects and the expansion. I know UCY is something that Jules, before the first cup, has worked tirelessly at, and long days, long hours, and taking care of a family on top of it. And it's not easy, and it's definitely not cheap. And a lot of us give up a lot of our free time to just work on getting things to work. I've been having quite a bit of issues with my website because of new things I've been trying to add to it that aren't wanting to embed right. But it's definitely something that takes a while. Definitely when you're doing it out of pocket, and we don't have a large crew that is constantly updating everything, and eventually we hope to get there. And we want it to be from the grassroots. We want this to be your network, or when it comes to Anti-Tyranny News, we want it to be the news that you want to be exposed. We want to be the ones that are spreading the truth and empowering the liberty and freedom within the individual. And I think right now is kind of a crucial time. We've seen a lot of good journalists either locked up and imprisoned, turn up dead for whatever reason. There's been wild conspiracy theories about some things, and not so wild conspiracy theories about others. I don't have the 100% facts, and I'm not going to comment on any individual one, but we've seen networks, close their doors, shut their service down. We've seen a lot of activists just kind of disappear into the shadows. That's why right now is really crucial in the liberty movement, because we do need to empower those people that are out there doing the work. I think when we look at Gray State and David Crowley, if this was a murder-suicide, if he was feeling the pressure of Gray State, I can understand. One thing that I've experienced, and I know a lot of other people that have experienced this, and I've watched other people they might not say that they've experienced it, but I believe I've seen them experience it. A lot of enthusiasm in the liberty movement. Just extraordinary enthusiasm. And when things like Gray State come out, or, the concept trailer comes out for Gray State, when I launched my website, when I decided that I was going to do, broadcast, everybody's behind you. Everybody's, oh, yeah, this is going to be awesome. Then what fails to be realized is the amount of money and work that comes along with it. And there is definitely a lot of ways that we have to find the cheapest route. And we try to do it in a way that's not going to affect the quality. And that's extremely hard to do. But when something like Gray State and the enthusiasm and all the people that just wanted it, I think that there was also how should I say a lack of the backing that needed to be there. Everybody wanted this, really professionally done movie. Basically a telling of our future if we don't change course. And we're kind of already seeing it. But what they don't, what they fail to realize is those are actors that you've seen in the concept. If those actors are going to continue, they have to be paid. When you start getting into high quality protection, you're not dealing with, a cheap camera, HD camera you got at Best Buy. And I'm saying cheap in a loose term. I'm not saying that, the high end cameras at Best Buy are cheap, but compared to what they would need to shoot, this stuff, yeah. And I think that kind of like myself, even though I don't have all the financing to do what, maybe Glenn Beck does or Alex Jones does, I still try to find ways to succeed in accomplishing my goals. And it makes it hard when you don't have that type of financial backing. But I think for some people, and I think that David truly was a creative genius, I think the concept trailer just showed that. And I think that how long it's been drug out because of, trying to get things done. And when you don't have the funding, everything tends to go a lot longer than you expect. I think that could have played a part because that's a lot of stress and being a veteran and the possibility that he had some level of PTSD, that maybe there was a breaking point, that he had all of this creative genius and he couldn't get it done fast enough. Years go by and you haven't put a movie out. But the sad thing is it's not his fault. And there is a short documentary, Gray State documentary, that was put out right after his passing. You can find it on YouTube. It's The Rise Director's Cut. It's basically covering the concept and everything. It goes really in detail. It's almost like a 2-hour documentary. But there is a time that we have to start supporting what networks and what activists and what media we have out there, because I think we're going to see hard times to come, and the people that are going to be telling you about things to expect, things to come, are not going to be the people that you tune your TV into. The mainstream media is not going to let you in on what's really going on out there. While you're watching them talk about Miley Cyrus, something might be going on behind the scenes. Okay, we have about 45 minutes left. Let me see here. I had another clip, but if it's too long, I can't remember how long it was. If it's too long, I'm not going to play it. Yeah, it's way too long. I'm not going to even play it. I did have another one here, though, that from Ben Swan that I wanted to play. If it's going to work. Okay. BenSwan.com. Now, we always hear about whistleblowers, right? We always have whistleblowers, and, well, Edward Snowden, he didn't go through the proper channels, and he didn't do it the right way, and that's why he's a bad guy, and that's why we got to hunt him down. Really? Really? Is that what you truly believe? Well, for former CIA Jeffrey Sterling, he found out, how you do it through the proper channels, and, what the benefits of that might be.
We begin with breaking news on the biggest trial in recent memory to receive virtually no media coverage. Jeffrey Sterling has been found guilty on all 9 counts he was facing. In fact, here is a shot of Sterling as he is leaving the courthouse today in Alexandria, Virginia. Sterling is a former CIA officer. He was accused of sharing classified information with New York Times reporter James Risen. The 9 counts that he was facing included an unauthorized disclosure of national defense information and obstruction of justice for allegedly leaking materials that prosecutors said put lives at risk and compromised one of the U.S. government's few mechanisms to deter Iran's nuclear aspirations. For his part, Sterling had claimed his innocence, and the New York Times reporter James Risen has refused to give him up as a source. Again, the jury in this case has found Jeffrey Sterling guilty on all 9 counts against him. I'm joined now by Norman Solomon, Executive Director for the Institute for Public Accuracy. Norman, I know you have been following this case now throughout the entire trial and even before that. But let's talk about what specifically happened today, because early today there were widespread reports that the jury had contacted the judge and said that they could not reach a decision on a number of these counts. Then we come back to this afternoon, just hours after that happens, and suddenly we've got the jury agreeing unanimously that he's guilty on all 9 counts. Any idea as to what happened there?
Well, there's no telling, except evidently the few people who were reluctant to go along with the majority decided to do so, and hence the unanimous verdict. I was in the courtroom every day for the trial, 7 days of testimony and proceedings, and it was extraordinary to have 23 different present and former CIA employees testifying in open court.
It's very interesting when we look at this case in particular because Jeffrey Sterling, according to the CIA, they say he is a whistleblower. They also said that he was blowing the whistle on something that really wasn't that important. It was almost much ado about nothing, but at the same time wanted to vigorously have him prosecuted. Was there a confusion there as to the mixed messages that the CIA was sending?
Well, I would put it this way. In its opening statement, the defense at one point referred to Jeffrey Sterling as a whistleblower. The government, though, referred to him as a disgruntled former employee, somebody who was bitter, and somebody who had decided, according to the government, to take out his anger and frustrations by spilling classified secrets. Everybody agreed that it was a circumstantial case. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, apparently, a circumstantial set of evidence can result in a conviction. This is one of those times. But frankly, as an observer, certainly sympathetic to Mr. Sterling, I have to say, still in all, that the evidence remained very circumstantial. There was never a smoking gun to establish his guilt.
Now, let's be clear here, because Sterling, we know, presented information about this covert operation to the House Intelligence Committee, and he testified before the House Intelligence Committee on this. And so we know that he was aware of that, correct?
This is the way I would describe it. We know he's a whistleblower because he went to the Senate Intelligence Committee staff and talked to them about his concerns over this Operation Merlin to give flawed design plans for a nuclear weapon component to Iran. So nobody can really dispute that he was a whistleblower who went through channels quite legally and properly.
And that's an important point because, yes, again, there are very specific legal distinctions to be made when someone is either deemed a whistleblower or simply a leaker or, in this case, disgruntled. So there was a specific channel that he did use that was a rightful channel. However, what they were claiming in court is that he also leaked this information to James Risen, the New York Times reporter, who ultimately wrote about it in a book because the New York Times wouldn't publish the article after Condoleezza Rice asked them not to. It's important to mention that James Risen never came out and named Sterling as his source, correct?
Yes, James Risen retained his integrity as a journalist. He refused to betray his sources. And in this case, we had two reasons why the hierarchy of the CIA and the White House were angry at Sterling. One is, as one of the few African-American case officers at the CIA, he had claimed racial bias and filed a suit for racial discrimination. And also because, although it was through channels, he took the actually very brave move to go to the Senate Intelligence Committee with his concerns about what frankly was a dumb and dangerous operation known as Operation Merlin. I mean, why would you give flawed nuclear weapons designs to Iran with the argument that that is going to stem nuclear proliferation, when in fact many people now knowing the facts believe quite opposite, that it possibly increased the risk of nuclear proliferation.
Now, we know there's only about a minute left, but we know there were about 90 different people, if I'm correct, who had access to the same information that Sterling had. Did he out himself by going through the correct channels? And does this send almost a chilling effect to other folks who would be whistleblowers to say, well, don't go through the official channels because that's how he was ultimately tracked?
Well, this is a big danger because we've been hearing from Secretary of State Kerry and President Obama, oh, if you're a whistleblower, Edward Snowden, you should have gone through channels.
That's right.
Baloney. The people who have gone through channels have been flagged as troublemakers, and they become lightning rods for legal scrutiny and sometimes harassment and prosecution.
And that's ultimately what I think a lot of folks expected in this case. They expected the jury to come back and find guilty on all 9 counts. Any idea, as we move forward, what this means for Operation Merlin? I know we're out of time, but the CIA has also kind of been on trial throughout this process, trying to justify the program. Any idea of how they ultimately will come out through this?
Well, the program is kaput. I mean, the program was so screwed up, frankly, it didn't have long to go. And then after it came out in the book in 2006, I think it was pretty much a goner.
Sounds good. Norman Solomon, Executive Director of the Institute for Public Accuracy. We appreciate you following the trial and your insight tonight.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
BenSwan.com. So we see, proper channels doesn't work out for you. You're better off going to Russia. This is how screwed up our system is. Oh, if you're a whistleblower, go to the proper channels because, telling the people that are the corrupt ones are going to help. If you're in the government, you can't trust a politician. You don't know who's paying them. These people go in and their salary for being a politician isn't that high, but they come out millionaires. You don't know where they're making their money, and you can't trust them. Proper channels evidently don't work. And it just almost sickened me the whole time, hearing people talk about Edward Snowden should have went through the proper. If he would have went through the proper channels, he wouldn't be a traitor. No, if he would have went through the proper channels, none of this stuff would actually probably came out. He would probably been locked away. He's still releasing stuff, I believe. Okay, I'm gonna read this article here from Vice.com, and then after I'm done reading, phone lines will be open, 718-717-8296. I want to hear your opinion on this. Pretty interesting article here. And I definitely want your guys' opinions. 718-717-8296. If you have me on Skype, you can hit me up that way. Titled, A New Form of ID Allows You to Be a Citizen of the World. Sounds a little fishy to me, thinking world government. Which many people claim that's exactly what they're trying to do. Says here, since the media storm around the birth of Silk Road and its eventual takedown, Bitcoin has made its way into the popular consciousness. Even lunatics are now vaguely aware of its existence, though usually tied to the idea of unsavory characters buying guns, drugs, or worse, from the dark recesses of the web. What has received less attention outside of tech circles, at least, is the totally revolutionary technology that underpins it, known as the blockchain. Without getting too technical, it's like a giant public ledger in which every Bitcoin transaction is recorded, but instead of it being held by one central authority, it's distributed among thousands of individual computer nodes, so the chance of faking any of the information in it, claiming you have 1,000 Bitcoins when your account is empty, say, or spending the exact same coin twice, is effectively zero. Though it was first created for digital currency exchange, the blockchain's core concept of decentralized, free to access, unchangeable public record can be adapted for a whole host of other services. We are still in the early days, but thinkers within the movement have already mapped out a fair few of them. It was at a meetup for Bitcoin users that I discovered some of these users through Janaea Lewis, aka Blockchain Girl, a 24-year-old management student billed as the first world citizen on the blockchain. A few months back, she became the proud owner of the first ever decentralized cryptographically signed proof of existence. In a ceremony that was live streamed across the web, since then she has become not just a poster girl for the crypto IDs, but an advocate for a hardline libertarian future where private contracts and distributed information replace more and more of what are now public functions. I met up with her in a vape lab. Shoreditch's hybrid Bitcoin hub come e-cigarette cafe to talk about passports, marriage contracts, and the death of the nation state. First thing first, what exactly is a blockchain ID and how does it work? Well, BitNation, a group promoting decentralized governance, launched the Blockchain ID pilot project last year in October. It's a private passport service that can validate people's existence using freely available tools that we have today. You can look up the exact steps to make one in the YouTube video, but basically it proves concretely that someone existed at a certain time and place as verified by another certain group of people. Then Vice asks, you got to be the first ever world citizen with it. How does it feel? I feel very honored by it. And also I feel like now it's my responsibility to promote the blockchain and everything else you can do with it. Vice, I heard it was invented by a guy called Chris. Did he want to be the first to have one? Well, I think the creators wanted someone who wasn't already involved in the area before to show that a person without any technical background can become a blockchain citizen, that it can be done everywhere and by anyone. And also, of course, my background is libertarian, so I grasp the philosophical basis of everything, even without special knowledge of the technology. Vice asks, so what exactly can you see the passport for today? Or use the passport for today? At the moment, the ID is more of an addition to use for things like online verification, but it can be used by stateless people. That's important, and there's a plan to develop the process in future to make it more simple for them to get one. Or if people want to declare themselves as a world citizen and not just whatever nationality they happen to be born as, this is a good way to express that view. Also, it is a pilot scheme for a private passport service that shows private solutions are capable of lots of the same functions as centralized government. There are so many things that government currently does that can actually be done in a voluntary and decentralized way. There's really no need for central governance services. People can just pay for whatever services they want. Okay, I see. So what do you think that the future would be like if people relied on government less and paid for everything themselves? It would be great. Even now, there are libertarian groups emerging everywhere. You can increasingly see that nation states are a model of the past. They all have high debts, and even those that are seen as working well have huge debts. It's just low in comparison to all the others. Everyone is struggling. I really can't think of a good government anywhere. So over time, people are becoming more and more aware of that and starting to look for other voluntary solutions. You mean the blockchain is taking us towards the death of the nation state? Maybe not just yet, but the technology allows for a lot of new possibilities for replacing what the state provides. Like one option would be to offer government services and packages so people can pay for whatever services they're going to use. That's how government should work. Instead of paying taxes that get wasted on things you don't even want, this way you can have a free choice and see exactly where your money is going. I gather there's a lot of other stuff you could use the blockchain for too. I heard about some people getting married through it. What's the deal there? Yes, that's what the first pilot project that BitNation did. It means that there's a smart contract, unlike traditional marriage. You're not bound for life, but can choose how long, 5 years, 10 years, 15, and then you have to renew it or it automatically ends. The advantage of that is that people aren't committing to it forever. So if one person in the marriage causes trouble, the other one doesn't get punished for the decision to leave them. Often after a divorce, the man needs to pay for the woman, but it could be the woman's fault. With a smart contract, no one can exploit the other one once the marriage ends. And you can marry someone you might not like that much. Well, personally, I would only marry on the blockchain. Traditional marriage is a big risk. It can destroy people's lives. So, are we all going to be using this technology a lot more from now on? I think it will take a long time for people to use things like blockchain marriage, as long as traditional options have other benefits like tax breaks, for example. But as a libertarian, I don't think one should make important life decisions based on what the state has to say about it. Agreed. Anything else to add? Sure. If you're interested, you should look up the blockchain ID on GitHub and see all the BitNation projects like land registry, marriages, and other things that will be possible in future. And that was from Vice. So if you have anything to add, what do you think about this idea of putting the ID system in something that's decentralized that government has no control over? Or do you think that IDs in a way are useless? What's your opinion on this? 718-717-8296. That's 717 or 718-717-8296. Feel free to call in. Let me know your opinion. I don't even know what to think. We are so wound up in the state system right now. I don't know if these ID systems. It's just so many people want you to verify who you are, and I understand that. You do some type of trick. You want to verify who you're dealing with, and so I can see the argument that you're going to need some type of proof of ID, and this would be a decentralized. No government has control. It'll be on a blockchain, so it's you can't corrupt it, and it works on nodes, so it can't be taken down. I still don't know, though. It's one of those things that I also see problems with it. A lot of people have a problem with government getting a hold of all your information. People tend to want to look for ways to become more private in a society that we've been losing any sense of privacy, really. You constantly have aerial photos being taken. You have drones in the air. You have, it just, the amount of privacy that people have lost. I think there is also a thirst for being able to get their privacy back. And, that's why Bitcoin became so popular right off the bat was, it doesn't have my name on it. But you also realize you put your address out there for people to donate to you or to buy products or services off of you. You're given your address. Well, then they can just go blockchain and see what transactions have occurred with you. It's anonymous to a point if you're doing person to person, but if you're doing things on the internet, it becomes less anonymous. You know what it does do though is it's more sound of a money than the Federal Reserve note, other than the Federal Reserve note. Yes, you get your piece of paper, unless you have it on a bank card or in a bank, or you use a credit card, then, well, then it's basically the same thing as Bitcoin, except Bitcoin can't be manipulated by a corporation or a government. There's only so many Bitcoins that can be made. And once those are there, that's the infinite amount. So, it will hold its value as long as people want to use it. And, well, if you have the choice between two currencies, neither one of them are backed by gold or silver, but one is constantly manipulated by the Federal Reserve and the government. The other one can't be manipulated by anybody. Therefore, your value might hold out a little bit better in the Bitcoin. And with the stock markets going nuts, guess what? People that got Bitcoin aren't really feeling the fluctuation as bad. But I think Bitcoin's also going to go down a little bit for the simple fact I think people are realizing that there's a bubble being created and they're trying to save their money, so a lot of spending's not going on. But that might also raise the price of Bitcoin. It's one of those funny things with economics. You usually have a couple of different ways it can go. Okay, we have about 20 minutes. I'm gonna try to cover this. I'm gonna try to skip ahead into it a little bit faster, but this is kind of what starts to aggravate me. And I'm a libertarian, okay? I'm not a constitutionalist, but I do understand the Revolutionary Act, the Bill of Rights, that it does outline a lot of natural rights, and I understand irrelevance of it in today's society. Definitely that we've moved farther away from personal freedom. Therefore, the Constitution, Bill of Rights, and all that becomes more relevant because it's the direction that we need to head back towards and surpass it. But there's one here from Next News Network. Mark Dice was interviewed. Americans willing to repeal the Bill of Rights. And I want to play this. I'm going to try to skip ahead, though, because it's 14 minutes long, and we got about 20.
The Islamic State, a very
hopefully this works.
Will blindly follow and agree with virtually any.
Might be having a little issue here. Might not be able to get this in. Let me try something.
We recently learned that President Obama is forging ahead with a new bill.
Okay, this will work. Firefox is messing up, which means I probably have a new update. I love how that works.
ahead with a new bill to authorize a war against the Islamic State. A very popular media analyst and political activist took to the streets to ask the...
Okay, I think
just not sure if we should maybe repeal those. It's just astounding that your average American isn't well versed on the foundation and the freedoms that we have been enjoying in this country for over 200 years. Just has to go and research whether or not we should maybe repeal the Bill of Rights. It's an astounding answer from an adult.
All right, Mark, let's take a look at this next clip that you brought us here.
He has announced that he's going to repeal the Bill of Rights to help make sure that we can keep everybody safe here in the homeland. Is that the right decision? Should we get behind Obama to make sure that the ISIS threat doesn't rear its head here in America?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah. I mean, end of day, yeah.
You know,
absolutely.
I mean, Obama probably knows he's in a better position to know if we should repeal the Bill of Rights to keep everybody safe.
Right, you would hope so. Right.
Okay.
Right. Wish I can give you more, but...
Hey, he just knows what's best. That's whatever he
I wouldn't
said.
say necessarily he knows what's best, but I think he's depending on an awful lot of people to
He's got some insider information.
Help him make the best decisions, right. Sometimes they might seem so from the beginning or from the surface, but only time will tell whether or not it was the right or wrong decision, right?
He is surrounded by a bunch of economic and political advisors, and if they're saying we should repeal the Bill of Rights, they probably know what's best for us, right?
You would hope so, yeah, absolutely.
All right, now this guy just says that he would basically trust the government and the White House administration experts no matter what. Is that a wise position to take?
You know, the love and the support of Obama has dwindled over the last 6 years, but his core base still will literally agree with any policy that comes out of his administration, no matter how anti-American, no matter how horrific, no matter how much it just simply doesn't make sense. And you can see with these people that I repeat multiple times to almost everybody that I talk to, that this is to repeal the Bill of Rights, to hammer that home, to see if a light bulb would go off in their head. They don't ask any questions. An authority figure comes up with a wireless microphone, a symbol of power and authority, a rather expensive piece of equipment, and stating a supposed fact that's just completely absurd. That, I mean, anybody with any common sense, any self-awareness should immediately either know that this is a joke, that this is a candid camera prank type of a video, or should start arguing with me and really just lay down why this is just the dumbest idea in the world. But
Mark,
do
you think that this is also perhaps an indictment of individuals who have a lot of faith in whatever comes out of somebody perhaps in media or someone that does have a microphone?
Well, this just demonstrates if me, just an average guy with an Obama T-shirt and a wireless microphone, can go out and just declare certain issues, certain fake facts are in existence. This is just a small microcosm of what the television does, because you have these powerful multi-billion-dollar news organizations with sets that are worth $250,000 with their fancy suits and graphics and satellite feeds from around the world doing these live shots, and a whole staff of producers and writers. And so the mainstream television networks can state a supposed fact, mix in some music and some fancy graphics in the background with their beautiful set or a backdrop of the White House, and it seems believable to a dumbed down public.
Well, we have seen Fox News has had to come back on a number of occasions to take back certain statements that they've had guests on and made declarative statements. Now let's take a look at this next clip.
Obama has announced that in the wake of the new rise of ISIS, the terrorist threat, we're going to repeal the Bill of Rights. Should we get behind that just to make sure that we don't have another 9/11 style attack?
Oh, shoot. My husband would be the one to ask this question. I don't follow it close enough to know, really.
If we should repeal the Bill of Rights. Well, they have insiders and experts, so I mean, if they're saying, Congress is saying we should do it, we should probably just get behind that. We don't want to.
Is it both sides you said are supporting it?
Both sides, Republicans and the Democrats support.
Well, then, if they're agreeing on something, then maybe it is a good thing.
We should get behind the repeal.
If they don't ever agree on anything. So if they're agreeing on something, maybe it's a good thing.
It's what's best for the New World Order.
Okay, well, let's do it.
Let's do it.
Let's get behind it.
All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Now, Mark, if both sides of Congress agree, must it be a good thing?
Well, that's what the average American thinks, and that's what this is just clearly demonstrating. If Congress supposedly agrees, if a person is told that an issue is fair and supported by both the Republicans and the Democrats, then it seems reasonable to them to support such an issue. Just again, going to show that people will blindly believe a statement with no reference, no fact-checking, no cross-referencing, just a simple soundbite off of its face value. Just an astounding, really, indictment on the idiocracy of America. I mean, the average American doesn't read a book, hasn't read a book in years, doesn't read any newspapers. They're reading 130-character little blips on their Twitter account or just scrolling through Instagram posts, not even digesting large chunks of information, just skimming bite-sized little bits and fractions of thoughts. It's an incredible indictment on what's happened to the thinking processes of this country.
Mark, let's take a look at this next clip.
The Republicans and the Democrats finally have agreed on something, that Obama has announced his decision to repeal the Bill of Rights in the wake of the rise of ISIS. And you think that we could get behind the Congress and understand that they probably know what's best in this phase of the war on terror?
I would think so, yeah. I would think so. I mean, especially what happened overseas in Paris.
And if they are saying with their experts that it's time to repeal the Bill of Rights, we could probably get behind that.
We could, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Are you an American citizen?
Yes, sir,
okay.
I am, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, Mark, I noticed that when you pull out the safe term, people seem to go along with almost anything you say, don't they?
Yes, it's been well over a decade now since the 9/11 attacks, several administrations ago now, and several elections ago, and people have been conditioned to be afraid, to think that the government's going to protect them. The American public have been trained and classically conditioned like Pavlovian dogs to give up the liberties that this country was founded on in the name of keeping them safe. It's the perfect ploy. It's the perfect scam in order to scare people into submission to rolling out Orwellian anti-American legislation like the Patriot Act, named, of course, to try to convince people that they're patriotic if they support it, when it's the exact opposite. Or when Obama signed the National Defense Authorization Act into law back in 2012, on New Year's Eve, when he basically said that American citizens can have their citizenship stripped if they're suspected of being involved with terrorist activities, and then deemed an enemy combatant, then removing their freedoms of due process. A completely Orwellian, tyrannical, really a Nazi-level type of legislation now. And we continue to go down this dangerous, slippery slope. And if a major terrorist attack were to rear its head on this country again, the vast majority of the public will willingly lay down the basic freedoms that this country was founded on in order to supposedly keep everybody safe from this impending threat.
Let's go take a look at your next clip.
As you probably saw in the news, both the Republicans and the Democrats have united a bipartisan effort to support Obama's plan to repeal the Bill of Rights to make sure that ISIS doesn't come and attack us on the homeland. Should we as a people get behind that bipartisan effort to repeal the Bill of Rights?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Just to make sure that we're safe.
Of course.
They're in a little better position to know whether we should, repeal these things for our own good.
Well, absolutely. They would come over here, right? What would happen? I'm drinking. Shouldn't do this. Mimosas.
Now, Mark, these answers are absolutely incredible, and it seems very clear that terrorists have a much louder voice to the American people than their own elected leaders do. What do you say?
What's also incredible is that these people they're everywhere, basically. I mean, I can shoot a video like this in just a matter of minutes. And when I started doing these series, I didn't expect anybody to actually agree with me. The point of the video was for me to pretend to be this crazy zealot Obama supporter coming up with these insane ideas. And I wanted to get people to argue with me. And that was supposed to be the sort of point, the punchline of the joke. But instead of people arguing with me about how crazy I was, and I wanted to work them up into a frenzy, they started just simply agreeing with the insane statements. And so you've seen over the years, these videos have just gotten more and more insane. This is basically part 2 of one where I got people to sign a petition to repeal the Bill of Rights for Obama. Just from telling them that Obama wants to repeal the Bill of Rights, they sign their name, birth date, and signature on the petition. And so this one, I wanted to get people's reactions. I wanted to hear what was going on in their mind about why we should do such a thing. So I sort of did a spin-off of that, and instead of having them sign a petition, I just simply asked them their reactions to this cause and why they think it's a good idea. It's just astounding. And this is why the public is so easily led. This is why the mainstream media really teaches the American people what's important in life. It sets the agenda. It just helps to keep them in a sedated state of amusement, really, instead of actually digesting real news. It's an infotainment-driven society, which is why it's great to have shows like yours, which can have extended interviews with fewer mainstream media editorial restrictions, where you can actually get down to the meat of a lot of issues and freely speak your mind and spread information without having these layers and layers of editorial and, in many cases, government control over what it is that makes it over the airwaves.
Well, that's what we do here. We want to bring this information to the public. You're doing the same thing. That is the job of the media, keep everybody informed, and we hope that we're accomplishing that goal. Mark, thanks for joining us. We look forward to having you back on again.
Thanks for having me.
That was Mark Dice. You can find out more about him at markdice.com. Of course, you can go to his YouTube channel as well. All the links are at markdice.com.
And that was from Next News Network on YouTube. Check them out there. But this is just the perfect example of the dumbing down of America. There is a large portion of the populace that's out there that they're more worried about partying, getting drunk in the middle of the day, as you heard the one, I've been drinking. Of having no worries, but their silence becomes, well, basically compliance with whatever the people in power are doing, and they perfectly demonstrate that there, where they're like, yeah, that's cool, yep, that works. It works all the way up until the point where their doors are being kicked in. Definitely the ones that, well, don't live in the city might live on some acres. And when their doors kicked in and they got moved to the city and all the rural area becomes government controlled. Oh, you don't think it'll happen? You just wait until a full socialist, fascist, communist, Marxist, whatever you want to call it, they all come from the same spectrum. When they're in control and they start taking the farmland that's going to be, the nation's crops. They already say that in the media. Obama's already signed things that allow him to take everything. And this type of these things aren't something new. And you start getting deeper into it. You start looking at FEMA regions and basically, well, if anything could go wrong or might go wrong, or you don't need your rights when things go wrong. It's more reason why you should have your rights. And I think if things go wrong, it's under the current government that things go wrong. It's under their incompetence, their corruption, and their malice that things will go wrong. Therefore, they don't have any authority after they do go wrong. Which I don't believe they have any authority now. But thanks for tuning in. Stay tuned here on UCY for Continual Condition coming up next. Take care, and I'll see you Friday.